On a scorching afternoon along Route 19 in rural Montana, a gas station became the stage for an act of cruelty that would ignite something far greater than anyone could have predicted. A man struck his own dog in the bed of his truck, not once, but repeatedly, while laughing at the animal's cries. What he didn't know was that parked just 30 feet away sat Cole "Iron Hand" Bennett, a Desert Storm veteran and founder of the Iron Brotherhood MC. A tight-knit crew of bikers bound not by blood, but by an unspoken code. Protect those who can't protect themselves. Cole had pulled over to refuel his '78 Harley Shovelhead when he heard the yelp. At first, he thought it was a kid. But when he turned and saw the trembling shepherd mix cowering in the truck bed, ears pinned back, and the man raising his hand again with that twisted grin, something in Cole's chest went cold. He'd seen cruelty before, in war, in back alleys, in the eyes of men who thought power meant domination. But this was different. This was a man who enjoyed it. Cole didn't shout. He didn't rush over. He simply pulled out his phone, opened the Brotherhood group chat, and typed 4 words: Route 19, gas station, now. Within minutes, the low rumble of engines began to echo across the valley. One by one, headlights appeared on the horizon. By the time the man climbed back into his truck, laughing to himself as the dog whimpered in the bed, he was no longer alone. 17 bikers had formed a semicircle around his vehicle, engines idling, arms crossed, faces unreadable. And Cole stood directly in front of the driver's door, his shadow falling across the windshield like a sentence waiting to be read. If you believe some promises don't need words, just action, then this story is for you. What happened next wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about violence. It was about something older, something that lived in the quiet spaces between right and wrong, the kind of justice that doesn't wait for a courtroom, and the kind of loyalty that doesn't need a reason. Over the next 7 days, Cole and his crew would do more than rescue one dog. They would uncover a network of cruelty, challenge a system that looked the other way, and prove that sometimes the only family that matters is the one you choose to ride with, no matter where the road leads. This is a story about a man who thought no one was watching, and the brothers who made sure he'd never forget that someone always is. The sun hung low and mean over Route 19, turning the asphalt into a shimmering ribbon of heat. Cole Bennett rolled his shovelhead into the gravel lot of Miller's Gas and Go, a weather-beaten station that looked like it had been standing since the Eisenhower administration. The pumps were old, the paint was peeling, and the only sound was the hiss of wind through the pines and the distant cry of a hawk circling somewhere above the ridgeline. Cole killed the engine and sat for a moment, letting the silence settle into his bones. He'd been riding since dawn, chasing nothing in particular, just the road, the way it always called to him when the weight of memory got too heavy. 48 years old, broad-shouldered and scarred, with a beard gone silver at the edges and hands that still carried the ghost of calluses from years working oil rigs before the war. He'd come home from Desert Storm in '91 with a chest full of medals and a head full of ghosts. The Iron Brotherhood MC had been his answer, not to forget, but to find a reason to keep moving forward. He swung off the bike and stretched, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back. The lot was mostly empty. A rusted Ford sedan sat near the air pump. A white pickup truck idled near the convenience store entrance, its bed covered by a tarp that flapped lazily in the breeze. Cole paid it no mind. He unscrewed the gas cap on the Harley and lifted the nozzle. That's when he heard it. A yelp, sharp, desperate, and unmistakably afraid. Cole froze, nozzle in hand. For a split second he thought it was a child, but the sound came again, higher pitched this time, followed by a low whimper that made his jaw tighten. He turned toward the white pickup. The tarp had shifted, and through the gap he saw movement, something dark and low, pressed against the side of the truck bed. Then he saw the man, tall, mid-30s, wearing a stained baseball cap and a sleeveless flannel shirt. He was leaning over the side of the truck, arm raised, and he was laughing. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh. A genuine belly-deep laugh, like he'd just heard the punchline to the funniest joke in the world. He brought his hand down hard. The dog yelped again, louder this time, and tried to scramble away, but there was nowhere to go. The man grabbed it by the scruff and shoved it back down, still grinning. Cole watched the animal, a German shepherd mix, maybe 3 years old, ribs visible through matted fur, cower and tremble, ears flat against its skull. Cole set the nozzle back on the pump. His hands didn't shake. They never did, but something old and familiar stirred in his chest. The same cold clarity he'd felt in the desert when the rounds started flying, and there was no time to think, only to act. He walked toward the truck. The man didn't notice him at first. He was too busy enjoying himself, muttering something under his breath as the dog whimpered. Cole stopped 3 feet from the driver's side door and spoke, his voice low and even. "That's enough." The man turned, startled. Up close, Cole could see the bloodshot eyes, the stale beer stink rolling off him in waves. The man looked Cole up and down, the leather vest, the Iron Brotherhood patch on the back, the faded scars on his knuckles, and his grin widened. "Mind your business, old man." Cole didn't move, didn't blink. "I am." The man snorted and turned back to the dog, raising his hand again. "Stupid mutt needs to learn." Cole's hand shot out and caught the man's wrist mid-swing. Not hard, just firm. The kind of grip that said, "This stops now." The man's eyes went wide. He tried to yank his arm free, but Cole held him there, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout ever could. "You hit that dog again, and we're gonna have a problem you don't want." For a moment, the only sound was the wind and the dog's labored breathing. The man's face flushed red, but something in Cole's eyes made him hesitate. Maybe it was the stillness. Maybe it was the way Cole's other hand rested casually near his belt, where a folding knife sat clipped to his pocket. Maybe it was just the weight of a man who'd seen too much to be bluffed. The man jerked his wrist free and stepped back, muttering something under his breath. "Crazy biker trash." Cole didn't reply. He just pulled out his phone, opened the Brotherhood group chat and typed, "Route 19, gas station, now." The man climbed into his truck, slammed the door, and started the engine. But before he could throw it into gear, Cole stepped in front of the vehicle, arms crossed, blocking the exit. "You're not leaving yet." The man honked. Cole didn't move. That's when the sound started. Low at first, a distant rumble like thunder rolling across the valley, then louder, closer. The man's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and his smirk faltered. One headlight appeared on Route 19, then 2, then 5, then a dozen. By the time the first bike rolled into the lot, the man's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. By the time the 17th rider pulled up and killed his engine, the man wasn't smiling anymore. Cole stepped aside and let the semicircle of motorcycles form around the truck, their riders silent, faces unreadable. He walked to the tailgate, lowered it gently, and reached for the dog. The shepherd flinched at first, but Cole's hand was steady, his voice soft. "Easy, boy, easy." The dog looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much cruelty and not enough kindness. Cole lifted him carefully, cradling the trembling animal against his chest, and turned to face the man in the truck. "You're gonna sit there," Cole said quietly, "and you're gonna wait for the sheriff, and if you try to leave, these 17 men are gonna make sure you don't get far." The man said nothing. He just stared at the wall of leather and chrome surrounding him. His earlier bravado evaporated like morning dew. Cole carried the dog toward his Harley, where one of the riders, a woman named Jax with a scar across her temple and a purple heart tattooed on her forearm, was already pulling out a first aid kit. As the sun dipped lower and the sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, Cole looked down at the dog in his arms and made a promise that didn't need words. "You're safe now, and nobody's ever gonna hurt you again." The sheriff's cruiser rolled into the lot 20 minutes later, kicking up dust that hung in the amber light like a curtain. Deputy Marlon Hayes stepped out, one hand resting on his belt, the other shielding his eyes from the low sun. He was a wiry man in his early 50s, with a graying mustache and the cautious gait of someone who'd learned not to rush into situations he didn't fully understand. When he saw the ring of motorcycles and the white pickup truck surrounded like a wounded animal in a pack, he stopped and let out a long breath. "Cole," he said, nodding toward the man standing beside the Harley, the dog still cradled in his arms. "Should have known." Cole didn't smile, but there was no hostility in his voice. Marlon. They'd known each other for years, not friends exactly, but men who understood the unspoken rules of their respective worlds. Hayes approached slowly, eyes sweeping over the scene. The bikers, the truck, the man inside with his hands clenched on the wheel, staring straight ahead like he could will himself invisible. "What happened?" Cole gestured toward the truck. "Man was beating his dog, in public, laughing about it." Hayes glanced at the dog, matted fur, visible ribs, eyes wide with fear, and his jaw tightened. He walked to the driver's side window and tapped on the glass. The man rolled it down an inch, just enough for his voice to slip through. "Officer, I didn't do anything. This guy's harassing me." "Step out of the vehicle, please." The man hesitated, then complied, moving slowly as if afraid the bikers might pounce. Hayes didn't look at them. He kept his focus on the man, his voice calm but firm. "Animal cruelty is a felony in Montana, you know that." The man's face went pale. "It's my dog, I can do what I want." "No, you can't." Hayes pulled out a notepad. "I'm going to need your license and registration, and I'm calling animal control." The man started to protest, but one look at the 17 bikers standing silent and still behind him made the words die in his throat. He fumbled for his wallet, hands shaking. Hayes took the information, radioed it in, and waited. The bikers didn't move. The dog, now wrapped in a blanket Jax had pulled from her saddlebag, rested his head against Cole's chest, breathing easier. When the animal control van arrived, a young woman named Rachel stepped out, took one look at the dog, and her expression hardened. She examined him carefully, checking for injuries, taking photos, making notes. The man tried to argue, tried to claim the dog was fine, but Rachel cut him off. "This animal is malnourished, dehydrated, and showing signs of repeated trauma. I'm seizing him under Montana Code 458211. The man's face turned red. "You can't just take my property." "He's not property," Cole said quietly. "He's a living thing." Hayes stepped between them. "Sir, you're being cited for animal cruelty. You'll receive a court date. If you have any further complaints, you can file them with the county. Right now, you're free to go, but the dog stays." The man looked like he wanted to fight, wanted to shout, but the wall of silent bikers made it clear that discretion was the better choice. He climbed back into his truck, slammed the door, and peeled out of the lot, tires spitting gravel. The moment the truck disappeared around the bend, the tension broke. Jax let out a long breath. A rider named Flint, a stocky man with a shaved head and a tattoo of a phoenix on his neck, shook his head. "Some people don't deserve to breathe the same air as the rest of us." Cole handed the dog to Rachel, who cradled him gently. "What happens now?" "I take him to the shelter, get him checked out by a vet, and start the process for rehoming." She looked up at Cole, something like gratitude in her eyes. "You probably saved his life today." Cole shrugged. "Just did what needed doing." Rachel loaded the dog into the van and drove off, leaving the bikers alone with Hayes. The deputy adjusted his hat and looked at Cole. "You know this could have gone sideways." "Could have, didn't." Hayes nodded slowly. "Are you planning on making this a habit?" Cole met his gaze. "If people keep doing things worth stopping, yeah." For a moment, the two men stood there, the weight of unspoken understanding passing between them. Then Hayes turned and walked back to his cruiser. As he opened the door, he called over his shoulder, "Try not to make my job harder than it already is, Cole." "No promises, Marlon." The cruiser pulled out, and the bikers began to mount their rides. Jax came up beside Cole, arms crossed, a faint smile on her lips. "You know that guy's gonna come looking for trouble. Let him." Flint fired up his bike, the engine roaring to life. "What now, boss?" Cole looked down the road where the van had disappeared, then back at his crew, men and women who'd followed him without question, who'd dropped everything because he'd sent a 4-word text. "Now, we make sure that dog gets a second chance. And we make sure everyone in this county knows that if you hurt something that can't fight back, you're gonna answer to us." Jax raised an eyebrow. "You starting a crusade?" Cole swung onto his Harley, kicked it to life, and looked back at her, just keeping a promise. As the sun set behind the mountains and the Iron Brotherhood MC rolled out of the lot in formation, the sound of their engines echoed across the valley like a hymn, raw, defiant, and unwavering. And somewhere in the back of an animal control van, a German shepherd mix, named by the end of the week simply as Chance, lifted his head and looked out the window, watching the world pass by for the first time, without fear. Miller's Junction, Montana, 8:47 a.m., 3 days later. The Iron Promise Animal Rescue sat on the edge of town, a converted barn with peeling white paint and a hand-carved sign that swayed gently in the morning breeze. It wasn't much to look at, just a single-story structure surrounded by chain-link runs and a gravel parking lot. But to the people who ran it, and the animals who found refuge there, it was sacred ground. Cole pulled up on his Harley, followed by Jax and Flint. They'd come to check on the dog, now officially named Chance by the shelter staff, and to see if there was anything else they could do. Rachel met them at the door, clipboard in hand, looking tired but pleased. "He's doing better," she said, leading them inside. The vet confirmed malnutrition and some old fractures that healed wrong, but nothing life-threatening. "He's gonna need time, but he's a fighter." They walked through the main room, past rows of kennels where dogs barked and wagged their tails, hopeful and desperate all at once. At the end of the hall, in a quieter section reserved for animals recovering from trauma, they found Chance. He was lying on a dog bed, eyes half closed, but when he saw Cole, his tail gave a tentative wag. Cole knelt beside him, running a hand over the dog's head. "Hey, buddy, you remember me?" Chance leaned into the touch, and for the first time since the gas station, something like peace settled over the animal. Jax crouched beside Cole. "He trusts you." "He shouldn't. Not yet." Cole looked up at Rachel. "What's the plan for him?" Rachel hesitated. "Normally, we'd put him up for adoption once he's healthy, but given his history, it's hard to place dogs with trauma. People want puppies. They want easy. So what happens if nobody takes him?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She didn't have to. Flint spoke up from the doorway. "That's bullshit. He deserves better than that." Cole stood, jaw set. "Then we make sure he gets it." Rachel blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we don't just drop him off and hope for the best. We make sure he finds a home. A real one." Cole looked around at the kennels, at the dozens of dogs waiting for someone to see them, to choose them. "And while we're at it, we make sure this place has what it needs to keep doing what it's doing." Rachel's eyes widened. "Cole, I appreciate the sentiment, but we're barely scraping by as it is. We run on donations and volunteers, and then we change that." Cole pulled out his phone and opened the Brotherhood group chat. "How much do you need?" "For what?" "For everything. Food, medical supplies, repairs, whatever." Rachel stared at him like he'd just offered her the moon. I don't know. Maybe 15,000 to get through the next 6 months." Cole typed a message. "Iron Promise Animal Rescue needs help. Who's in?" Within 30 seconds, replies started flooding in. $500 from Axel, $1,000 from Reaper, $750 from Bones, $2,000 from the Colorado chapter. By the time Cole put his phone away, the Brotherhood had pledged $18,000. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything, just keep doing what you're doing." Cole turned back to Chance. "And let me know when he's ready for a forever home. I'll make sure he finds one." Dut. As they left the shelter and mounted their bikes, Jax shook her head in disbelief. "You just raised 18 grand in 2 minutes." Cole shrugged. "People want to help. They just need to know where to point it." Flint grinned. You know what this means, right? We're officially in the dog-saving business now. Cole didn't smile, but there was a glint of something in his eyes. Purpose, maybe, or just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd done something that mattered. If you're enjoying this story of loyalty and second chances, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. The call came on a Thursday night, 2 weeks after the gas station incident. Cole was working late in his garage, rebuilding a carburetor on a 72 Panhead, when his phone buzzed. The number was local but unfamiliar. Yeah, Cole Bennett? The voice was female, clipped, professional. Who's asking? This is Deputy Monica Reyes with the Flathead County Sheriff's Office. I need to speak with you about an incident involving Trevor Hollis. Cole set down his wrench. Trevor Hollis, the man from the gas station. What about him? He's been causing problems, harassing the shelter, making threats. Rachel filed a restraining order, but he's not backing down. I thought you should know. Cole's grip tightened on the phone. What kind of threats? Nothing specific enough to arrest him on, but enough to make everyone nervous. He's been parked outside the shelter, taking photos, posting on social media about how his property was stolen. Reyes paused. Rachel's scared, Cole, and I don't have the resources to station someone there 24/7. You don't need to. Reyes was quiet for a moment. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm not offering anything illegal. I'm just saying you don't need to worry about Rachel. Cole, thanks for the heads up, Deputy. He ended the call and immediately texted the Brotherhood. Shelter's got a problem. Meeting at the clubhouse. 1 hour. By the time he arrived, the small meeting room above Flint's auto shop was packed. 17 riders sat around a battered wooden table, faces grim, arms crossed. Cole laid out the situation. Hollis, the threats, the restraining order that meant nothing if no one was there to enforce it. Jax spoke first. So what's the play? We can't just beat him up. That gets us arrested. We don't touch him, Cole said. We just make sure he knows he's being watched. Flint leaned forward. You talking about a rotation? Guard duty? Something like that. 2 riders at the shelter at all times, visible. We don't hide. We don't threaten. We just exist. A rider named Axel, a former Marine with a prosthetic leg and a patch that read Semper Fi, nodded slowly. Deterrence. Exactly. They worked out the details. Shifts, contact protocols, rules of engagement. No weapons. No confrontation, just presence. If Hollis showed up, they'd document it, call the sheriff, and wait. The goal wasn't to fight. It was to send a message. You're not dealing with one person anymore. You're dealing with all of us. The first shift started the next morning. Cole and Jax parked their bikes in front of the shelter, engines off, arms crossed, watching the road. Rachel came out with coffee and gratitude in her eyes. You didn't have to do this. Yeah, Cole said. We did. Hollis showed up on day 3. He rolled past the shelter in his white pickup, slowing down just enough to glare at the 2 bikers standing outside. Cole didn't react, didn't move, just met the man's eyes and held them until Hollis sped off. That night, Hollis posted on social media, biker thugs harassing law-abiding citizens. Where's the justice? The Brotherhood's response was simple. They flooded his post with photos of Chance, healthy, happy, adopted by a retired firefighter named Tom, who'd lost his own dog the year before. The caption read, "This is what justice looks like." Within 24 hours, Hollis's post was buried under a wave of support for the shelter. Donations poured in. Local news picked up the story. And Hollis went silent. On the 7th day of the rotation, Deputy Reyes called Cole again. He's gone, moved out of state, left a forwarding address in Idaho. Cole nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Good. You know, Reyes said, what you did, it's not technically legal. Wasn't technically illegal either. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. You're a pain in the ass, Bennett. I've been called worse. After the call ended, Cole sat on his bike outside the shelter, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Jax came up beside him, hands in her pockets. Think he's really gone? For now. And if he comes back? Cole looked at her, and in his eyes was the same quiet certainty that had carried him through war, through loss, through every hard road he'd ever ridden. Then we'll be here. Word spread fast in a small town. Within a month, the Iron Brotherhood MC had become something more than just a motorcycle club. They'd become a symbol. People started calling when they saw animal abuse, when they found strays, when they needed help that the system couldn't or wouldn't provide. Cole never planned for it, never asked for it. But once the calls started coming, he couldn't bring himself to ignore them. The first call after Hollis came from a woman named Linda, a school teacher in her 60s, who'd found a litter of puppies dumped on a dirt road outside town. She didn't know what to do, but she'd heard about the bikers who helped the shelter, so she took a chance. Cole and Flint rode out that afternoon. The puppies, 5 of them maybe 6 weeks old, covered in fleas and barely able to walk, were huddled in a cardboard box by the side of the road. Linda stood nearby, wringing her hands. I didn't know who else to call. Cole knelt beside the box, his large hands impossibly gentle as he picked up one of the puppies. It was a scrawny little thing, all ribs and fur, but it licked his thumb and wagged its tail. You did the right thing. They loaded the puppies into Flint's saddlebag carrier, a custom rig he'd built for exactly this kind of situation, and took them straight to Iron Promise. Rachel met them at the door, already pulling on gloves. You're going to run me out of kennel space. Then we'll build more. And they did. Over the next 2 months, the Brotherhood organized fundraisers, charity rides, poker runs, auctions. They brought in contractors who owed them favors. They worked weekends and late nights, expanding the shelter, adding new kennels, upgrading the medical wing. By the time winter rolled around, Iron Promise had doubled in size, but it wasn't just the physical space that changed, it was the culture. People started showing up to volunteer, veterans, mechanics, nurses, teachers. They came because they'd heard the stories. They stayed because they saw the work. One Saturday afternoon, a man named Hector, a former army medic with haunted eyes and a tattoo of dog tags on his forearm, showed up with a toolbox and a quiet request. I heard you could use some help. Cole looked him over. You good with your hands? Good enough. You okay working with people who don't talk much? Hector's jaw tightened. Prefer it, actually. Cole handed him a hammer. Welcome to the crew. By Christmas, the shelter had 15 regular volunteers, most of them veterans, most of them carrying their own scars. They didn't talk about the past, didn't need to. They just showed up, did the work, and went home a little lighter than when they'd arrived. One evening, as Cole was locking up, Rachel stopped him at the door. You know what you've built here, right? Cole shrugged. Just a place for dogs. No. She shook her head. It's more than that. It's a place for people, too. People who needed a reason to keep going. Cole didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and walked out into the cold, where Jax was waiting by the bikes. You good? She asked. Yeah, just thinking. About what? Cole looked back at the shelter, lights glowing warm against the winter darkness, the sound of dogs barking and people laughing filtering through the walls. About how one scared dog at a gas station turned into all this. Jax smiled. Funny how that works. They rode home through the snow, the rumble of their engines a steady heartbeat against the silence of the Montana night. Not everyone was happy about the Brotherhood's new role in town. There were people who saw them as troublemakers, vigilantes playing hero, and there were people who had reasons to want them gone. Ray Cullen was one of them. Cullen ran a puppy mill on the outskirts of Flathead County, a sprawling property hidden behind chain-link fences and no trespassing signs. For years, he'd operated in the grey areas of the law, breeding dogs in filthy conditions and selling them online to buyers who didn't ask questions. The county knew about him. Animal Control had inspected him twice, but he always had just enough documentation, just enough plausible deniability to avoid serious trouble, until someone sent an anonymous tip to the Iron Brotherhood. The message came through the shelter's email. Cullen's place. Check the back barn. You'll see. Cole read it 3 times, then forwarded it to Deputy Reyes. Her response was blunt. "We've looked. He's clean." "Technically," Cole replied. "What if he's not? Then prove it. Legally." That was the problem. Cole wasn't a cop, wasn't an investigator. He was just a man with a motorcycle and a promise. But he'd learned over the years that sometimes the best way to shine a light on darkness was to make it impossible to ignore. He called a meeting, laid out the situation, showed them the email. Flint leaned back in his chair. "You're talking about surveillance." "I'm talking about being in the right place at the right time." Jax raised an eyebrow. "And if we see something, we document it. We call the authorities. We do it by the book." Axel crossed his arms. "And if Cullen makes us? Then we ride away. No confrontation, no escalation." They voted, unanimous. For 3 nights, 2 riders at a time, parked on the public road bordering Cullen's property. Cameras ready, eyes sharp. They didn't trespass, didn't get closer than the law allowed, just watched. On the 3rd night they saw it. A truck pulled up to the back barn, unmarked, no plates visible in the dark. 2 men unloaded crates, and from inside came the sound of whimpering. Lots of it. Flint, on shift with a rider named Bones, grabbed his phone and started recording. Every detail, timestamp, license plate when the truck turned. The way the men moved, hurried, nervous, guilty. When the truck left, Flint sent the footage to Reyes with a single message. "You'll want to see this." 2 days later, Animal Control and the Sheriff's Department executed a search warrant. They found 37 dogs in the back barn, malnourished, sick, living in cages stacked 3 high. Cullen was arrested. His operation was shut down. The story made state news. The Iron Brotherhood was mentioned. Some people called them heroes. Others called them meddlers. Cole didn't care. He cared about the 37 dogs now safe at Iron Promise and 2 other shelters. He cared about the volunteers who'd stayed up all night helping Rachel process the rescues. He cared about the way Hector had held a shaking chihuahua and whispered, "You're okay now. You're okay." That's all that mattered. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let us know you're with us. Spring came to Montana like a slow exhale. Snow melted into rushing creeks. Wildflowers painted the hillsides. And at Iron Promise Animal Rescue, every kennel was full, not with despair, but with hope. Cole stood in the main yard, watching a group of kids from the local elementary school visit the shelter for the first time. They squealed and laughed as puppies climbed over them, tails wagging, tongues licking every available surface. Rachel stood nearby, clipboard in hand, explaining adoption procedures to a young couple who'd just fallen in love with a beagle mix named Scout. Jax came up beside Cole, arms crossed, a rare smile on her face. "You did this." Cole shook his head. "We did this. Don't be modest. It doesn't suit you." He glanced at her. "You really think one guy can change all this?" "No, but one guy can start it. And that's what you did." Before Cole could respond, a familiar truck pulled into the lot. Not white this time, but red, clean, well kept. Tom, the retired firefighter who'd adopted Chance, climbed out, and in the passenger seat sat the dog himself. Chance had filled out. His coat was glossy. His eyes were bright. When he saw Cole, he barked once, sharp, joyful, and jumped out of the truck, bounding over like a puppy. Cole knelt, and Chance nearly knocked him over, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. Tom walked over, grinning. "Thought we'd stop by, show you how he's doing." Cole scratched behind Chance's ears, feeling the warmth of the dog's trust, the weight of a promise kept. "He looks good. He's family now." Those 3 words hit harder than Cole expected. He stood, cleared his throat, and shook Tom's hand. "Thank you for giving him a real shot." Tom nodded. "Thank you for making sure he had one." As the afternoon wore on, more visitors arrived. Adopters, donors, volunteers. People who'd heard the stories and wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. By the time the sun set and the last car pulled out of the lot, the shelter was quiet again. Cole walked through the kennels, checking water bowls, adjusting blankets, making sure every animal was settled for the night. At the last kennel, he stopped. A new arrival, a pit bull mix found abandoned in a dumpster, watched him with wary eyes. Cole opened the gate slowly, sat down on the floor, and waited. The dog didn't come over, not yet, but he didn't back away either. "You're safe here," Cole said quietly. "I know you don't believe me yet, but you will." He sat there for a long time, just being present, just offering the one thing every broken thing needed: time. Outside, the Iron Brotherhood MC had gathered in the parking lot, 17 riders, engines idling, waiting for Cole. When he finally emerged, Jax called out, "You ready?" Cole looked back at the shelter. Lights still glowing, dogs still barking softly, the sound of life continuing in the spaces he and his crew had helped create. "Yeah, let's ride." They rolled out into the Montana night, engines rumbling like a hymn, headlights cutting through the darkness. They didn't know where the road would take them next. Didn't need to. Because they'd learned something in the months since that day at the gas station, something that couldn't be unlearned. Some promises don't need words. Some families aren't born, they're chosen. And some battles are worth fighting, not because they're easy, but because they matter. As the stars came out over the mountains and the sound of their engines faded into the distance, one thing was certain. Wherever cruelty raised its hand, wherever the voiceless cried out, wherever injustice thought it could hide in the shadows, the Iron Brotherhood would be there, not for glory, not for recognition, just to keep a promise. Thank you for riding with us through this story. If it moved you, inspired you, or reminded you why loyalty and kindness matter, please hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories of courage, justice, and second chances. We'll see you on the road.